Hello, I'm Jon Dee, the Managing Director of Do Something and the Australian Coordinator for RE100. I'm speaking to you today from Katoomba in the New South Wales Blue Mountains. It's the land of the Gundungurra and Darug peoples, and I'd like to start our webinar by acknowledging their elders past and present in our community. Today, our joint webinar with Business Renewable Centre Australia will look at how companies are mapping the road to using 100% renewable energy. For those of you who aren't familiar with RE100, it's the global renewable energy initiative that's led by the Climate Group in partnership with CEP. To date, more than 385 major companies have joined RE100 with the aim of switching to 100% renewable electricity by a set date. Our guests today include representatives from two members of RE100, Scott Edwards from Coca-Cola Europacific Partners and Daniel Kim from Sun Metals. Also joining them are Anita Stadler from Energetics and Jackie McEwen from Business Renewable Centre Australia. After you've heard from our panellists, if you have any questions that you want to ask us today, please put them in the Zoom chat and we'll try and answer them towards the end of the webinar. To get things underway, I'm glad to say that Jackie McEwen from Business Renewable Centre Australia joins me today to co-host today's webinar. Jackie, it's great to be doing this webinar with BRC-A today. For those people watching who aren't familiar with Business Renewable Centre Australia, can you tell us what does BRC-A do and how does it help companies to go renewable?
Thanks, John, and hi, everybody. Business Renewables Centre provides independent guidance, connection and the how-to resources to companies seeking to decarbonise their business through renewable energy procurement. So in a nutshell, through these resources and our training, webinars like this one, we help industry to better understand the Australian energy markets and their buying options, especially via power purchase agreements or PPAs.
Now today, BRC-A and RE100 are running a webinar to show how companies are making that transition to using 100% renewable electricity. From the BRC-A perspective, what are people going to get from watching this webinar today?
Yes, so the purpose of today's session is really to give people an understanding of how other companies are approaching the 100% renewable electricity challenge as part of their net zero strategies. So whether you're a large or a small buyer of energy, there are a wide range of options and actions that companies can take, from energy efficiency, demand management, on-site renewables, through to purchasing LGCs, procuring PPAs for off-site renewables, etc. We see many companies that are taking a portfolio approach, so more than one of these options, and understanding what other companies are doing and how close these various options can get you to your goals is fundamental knowledge for a successful corporate strategy. We'll also give you a little bit of a picture for the Australian market from our annual State of the Corporate PPA Market Report, just completed for 2022, in a little bit. Thanks, John.
Thanks for setting that out, Jackie. After we've heard from our guests, you and I are going to chat in more detail later, and I'll look forward to that. Thanks, Jackie. Now, that was Jackie McEwen from BRC-A. The first guest to join us on the webinar today is Scott Edwards, the Head of Sustainability for Coca-Cola Europacific Partners in Australia. Scott has been with the business for 18 years, and for all of that time, he's been working on energy efficiency and emissions reductions packaging, sustainability and water stewardship. A big part of his current work has him developing decarbonisation roadmaps to net zero emissions by 2040. And I'm glad to say that he joins us now. Scott, many thanks for joining us today. I want to start by talking about Coca-Cola Europacific Partners and its membership of RE100. The company joined RE100 in 2016. It's the world's largest Coca-Cola bottler. It employs over 33,000 people. It has about 2 million customers in 26 countries. So I think it's safe to say that Coca-Cola Europacific Partners is using a very large amount of electricity. So why did it commit to go 100% renewable with that electricity use?
Yeah, we do use a fair bit, John. Thank you, and thank you for having me today. So When we joined RE100, we joined as Coca-Cola Amatil, and then later became the Europacific partners that we are now. So at the time, it was our net zero emissions through scopes 1 and 2 by 2040, the commitment that we actually made. And now as CCEP, it's part of our net zero commitment across all 3 scopes of emissions. And we're managing that through RE100 and SBTI. And similarly, at the time, our customers weren't really asking for it per se, but I feel the expectation was there, actually, that CCEP would also take the lead and help drive the uptake of renewables in Australia and across the Pacific.
Now, Coca-Cola Europacific Partners has entered into a PPA. For people who are not familiar with PPAs, what are they, and why did you contract via a PPA?
Sure. So PPA, power purchase agreement, basically an energy contract of a slightly different type. It was a way for us to start that journey that gave us the confidence then to the board and to the leadership team that was a low risk, but also helped build renewable capacity in Australia. So additionality was quite an important aspect of that initial PPA for us. So we partnered on that initial power purchase agreement in the Murra wind farm down in Victoria. With a consortium led by Telstra, and we used that experience to build internal capability and confidence within the leadership team of that process.
How much of a factor were sustainability goals and financial management goals in your decision to go renewable?
Yeah, look, early on, both were very important. It was an energy contract term we'd never taken to the leadership team before. Typically, they were quite short term, 2-3 years. So there was a lot of engagement with the board and the CFO before we actually got to that point that was necessary to get everyone comfortable with it. And having the partners of the calibre that we had in that PPA with Murra were pretty crucial in building that trust internally too. So. And from a sustainability perspective, it was also new to us as well. We also had to get everyone up to speed on what Scope 2 emissions actually were and why they mattered long before we actually got to the point of making any net zero commitments as part of it.
And what are the key elements of your approach to achieving your 100% renewables target? Is it a combination of elements like rooftop solar and PPAs?
Very much so. So our approach is an agnostic one, both from a technology and a procurement perspective. We're not particularly focused on solar over wind, for example, but we were quite adamant about it being additional to the current generation supply before all the grid connection issues that have slowed things down recently actually became such a problem. So getting in early was an advantage in that respect. Now, though, we have 2 PPAs. The second one, and they are both wind power, comes online January 1st next year, and we also have capitalised behind the meter solar PV installs that are helping us generate the LGCs that we need to move us along towards RE100. So the solar we have on site, we've got about 3.5 megawatts installed within Australia to date, and more coming online this year, and a few more systems lined up for next year as well. There's a 1 megawatt system in our Fiji bottling plant, and a little bit over a 7 megawatt system on our factory in Jakarta in Indonesia.
Now, beyond the pure renewable electricity goal, how important were social and environmental co-benefits to Coca-Cola Europacific partners?
Sure. So if I start with the wind farm investments, we're not the developer, but each of the farms contributes, the wind farms that is, contributes to the local communities in a number of ways. So both have got operational maintenance staff locally based, so that's 12 to 15 odd people in regional area employment. Each is co-located on grazing ground, and that land still used for that purpose. In both cases, the owners of the wind farms directly financially contribute to the local community through grant programs for schools, for sporting equipment, community groups, that sort of stuff. Once we get done and we get to RE100, we'll be removing over 70,000 tonnes in Australia, that is, and 190,000 tonnes of emissions across our operations in Australia, the Pacific and Indonesia of that scope 2 from our footprint annually. So it's a great engagement tool for our people, especially where we've got the PV on site, to see how it directly improves our sustainability performance.
Now, you and I have spoken in the past about how important it is to get, internal buy-in from colleagues and from stakeholders. How did you achieve internal buy-in to when it came to setting and meeting your renewable electricity goals?
Yeah, yeah. So for RE100 specifically, to be honest, we started with the numbers, the financial numbers, the business case value. We got the CFO on board, and then the board to start with. So from there, we started to bring in the other elements around carbon reduction and the like through the lens of an external stakeholder expectations, what our peers were doing in the rest of the Coca-Cola and bottling community around the world, and the broader food and beverage sector as well.
Now, in light of the current high electricity prices that we're all aware of, how important has that decision been to go renewable with your electricity use?
Oh, look, increasingly so. Unsurprisingly, both the PPAs and the PV systems that we've actually got are providing a pretty reasonable buffer to rising prices, and that'll become more important in the future as we further electrify our operations to get us towards that net zero position.
Final question, Scott. What three pieces of advice would you give to other companies that are just starting out on this process?
Sure, there's probably lots, and I had a good think about it. The three main pieces, to be perfectly honest, I would start with. So understand your true and full electricity footprint. Have a plan to cover it all. So you don't want to fall foul of any greenwashing claims. So the ACCC, for example, is doing a lot of focus in this area at the moment. And line up your first follower first early. So ideally, someone like the CFO, and understand the co-benefits to it, the social side of things I was talking about earlier. Number two would be probably develop an understanding of what's possible and what's viable to do on-site versus off-site. You tend to gain a little bit more total benefit with on-site, but typically you can't cover your full requirement to RE100 this way. Depends on your demand, of course, and how much roof space you've got. And the third one, be prepared to have to increase that coverage over time if you've made net zero commitments that involve any electrification of other processes that you've actually got on site or new assets as well.
Well, that's all very good advice, Scott. Thanks for that. And it's a good point to end on. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
No problem.
That was Scott Edwards, the sustainability lead at Coca-Cola Europacific Partners. Our next guest is Daniel Kim, the Director of Clean Energy at Sun Metals Corporation in Townsville. Daniel is responsible for helping the Sun Metals zinc refinery to become one of the first refineries in the world to produce green zinc. He's got extensive experience advising on deals in renewable energy, natural resources and infrastructure, and he's worked in both the public and private sectors. Safe to say he's passionate about accelerating the energy transition for commercial and industrial scale consumers of electricity, especially those that are operating in hard-to-abate industry sectors. I'm glad to say that he's with us now. Daniel, many thanks for joining us today. Sun Metals Corporation is a member of RE100 here in Australia. It's also one of the biggest electricity users in Queensland. What were the key drivers for Sun Metals going 100% renewable?
Yeah, good afternoon, John. It's great to be with you. Now, look, we at Sun Metals are very proud actually to be the first major refiner in the world to join RE100 and actually commit to powering our entire operations from 100% renewable energy by 2040 and 80% by 2030. There are a number of key drivers to that. I mean, we are part of the Korea Zinc Group, which is the largest zinc producer in the world. But in Townsville, in North Queensland, we're actually also the largest private sector employer up there. So just fundamentally, there's a corporate responsibility that we felt to do everything that we could to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. But I think the other thing, so it's the right thing to do, but increasingly we're finding that it's the smart thing to do. And so look, as we look to jurisdictions like Europe that are proposing to legislate things like the carbon border adjustment mechanisms, so we want to ensure, we want to get out ahead of it and ensure that our zinc continues to be competitive, that we continue to be a preferred supplier to our customers all around the world. But the hope, of course, is that green zinc will actually potentially attract premium pricing.
Now, what are the key elements of your renewable energy strategy? How are they broken down?
Yeah, it's a good question. So given the zinc refinery, I mean, we operate 24/7. We are a very intensive and extreme use of electricity. And so the diurnal profile actually is really important for us. So Typically, the sun is strongest during the day, but what's great in Queensland is that the wind typically is strongest at night. So we've adopted a portfolio approach. We've as Sun Metals 5 years ago, we started this journey. We actually developed, built, own, and we currently operate a 124 megawatt solar farm, which is co-located with the zinc refinery. It supplies about 22% of the refinery's requirements, but our sister company, Arc Energy, since its establishment early last year, has also invested in a number of wind projects, including the McIntyre Wind Farm, where they are a UJV participant with Acciona there. So a combination of the Sun Metals solar, the McIntyre Wind, and other wind farms that Arc Energy will invest in, where we will be on the other end of a corporate PPA with our sister company, Arc Energy, is an important part of the mix. The final piece of the puzzle for us is energy storage. So we are currently working with our sister company on an energy storage solution at Sun Metals. Currently, the scope is a 140 megawatt battery, 2-hour battery, which will allow us to time shift that renewable energy from periods of the day where the renewables are strong, but where again our demand is very high and extreme wholesale prices in the NEM. So giving us some insulation there to that high price volatility in the NEM.
Well, that certainly makes a lot of sense. Now, as Sun Metals moves towards becoming 100% renewable with its electricity use, have you come across any challenges or any barriers that you can share with us?
I think, John, there's just a fundamental challenge that we have of being such an extreme user. I mean, we are the second largest single site consumer of electricity in Queensland. I mean, total consumption is about 1.3 million megawatt hours a year. So that in itself just creates an enormous challenge. And what it's actually meant for my engineering colleagues at the refinery is they've taken very proactive steps to increase the demand response capability of the actual refinery itself. And so we can turn down that refinery in those very high price events within the NEM. The engineers don't like it, but we do have that capability. But look, I think as we have taken steps to actually develop and build and operate the solar farm, of course that there was huge learning curves that we had to encounter in terms of just understanding not just the development of these projects, but how they operate as a behind the meter solution for the zinc refinery, but also our solar farm is actually grid connected. So how it also operates in the NEM has also been a challenge. But look, we've invested heavily in our people, and those investments have actually are really paying off as we continue on this renewable energy journey.
Talking of that solar farm, we've actually got some footage that we might show in your next answer. Now, as we show that footage, can you tell us a bit more about your approach to behind the meter solar and more about what you're doing on that front that maybe you can share with others?
Yeah, no, we're really proud of the Sun Metals solar farm. I mean, it still today is the largest integrated industrial use solar farm in the country. I mean, at the time of its commissioning, this was sort of 2018. This was world class in terms of the co-location, and you can see there the 1.26 million solar panels in the foreground and the refinery in the background there. But look, one of the challenge we had as a behind the meter solution is just optimizing what is a very dynamic relationship between the performance of the solar farm and also the performance of the refinery. But it's a very important one, as I said, to be able to optimize the performance of both.
Now, a lot of people are talking about green hydrogen, but Sun Metals is actually getting on and doing something on that front. Can you tell us about your green hydrogen strategy and your initiatives to use green hydrogen in your transport vehicles?
Yeah, so John, within the group in North Queensland, we have a sister company, Townsville Logistics, which operates 28 big prime movers. These are sort of 140 ton rated sort of triple trailer trucks. These trucks operate between the port of Townsville. They bring the zinc concentrate into the refinery, which is about 15 kilometres away. So because we own these trucks as part of the group, they actually form part of our Scope 1 emissions. And so the big challenge, of course, is how we decarbonise and how we reduce those emissions. And I think, within the group, what we realised is that renewable hydrogen does provide that true green solution to replacing diesel and decarbonising this trucking fleet. As I mentioned, I mean, the payload of these vehicles just negates from them being electrified. The weight of the batteries would simply it would negate from the payload, but also these vehicles operate 24/7 when the ships come in. So it just wouldn't be possible to sort of take them offline for hours at a time to recharge. And so that's where hydrogen does provide that terrific solution. We are working with our sister company, Arc Energy, to develop and build the Sun HQ hydrogen hub, which is located in the refinery and amongst the solar panels, where we will produce, compress, store and dispense green hydrogen for initially five ultra heavy fuel cell electric trucks, which Arc Energy will own, and then they'll be leased to our sister logistics company. But what's really exciting, John, is this infrastructure will be able to be leveraged by other third-party customers to also help them decarbonise, their commercial fleets.
Now, the parent entity for some metals, as you know, is Korean Zinc. What are they doing overseas with renewable energy?
Yeah, it's a big challenge. So our parent company has also joined RE100. They've given themselves a little bit more time to hit that target, and rightly so. It's a huge operation in Korea. They are taking steps to tackle their Scope 2 emissions. The reality is, though, the Korean Peninsula, the topography of it is such that it's very mountainous, and it doesn't lend itself to kind of utility scale solar and onshore wind. So, look, they are taking steps, but it is challenging. We are, though, as a group, looking at other operations around the world, particularly in Southeast Asia. We have facilities in both Thailand and Vietnam, and I think the group intends to really leverage our experience in North Queensland to help decarbonise our operations in Southeast Asia and then ultimately Korea as well.
Final question, Daniel. Given everything that you've learned on your renewables journey, what is your advice to other energy users watching now?
Well, I think notwithstanding, you might operate in a notoriously hard to industry sector. I think, our experience shows that there are solutions out there, and you really just need to crack on and get on with it. And I think when you do, our experience is that it aligns us far more closely with our customers, with our people, and with the communities in which we operate. So as I reflected and touched on earlier, I think it really is not only the right thing to do, but it is the smart thing to do.
Thanks, Daniel. They were very useful insights, and again, a very good point to end on. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Daniel Kim, the Director of Clean Energy at Sun Metals Corporation in Queensland. Now, we've just heard some real-world examples from two RE100 members as to how they're transitioning to 100% renewable electricity. Let's now get into some more detail as to how other companies in Australia are making that shift to renewables. Joining us to tell us more about that is Anita Stadler, the Head of Renewable Energy Investments at Energetics. Anita has advised companies on many landmark PPA deals, and she's an experienced risk advisor and strategist who led the development of Energetics corporate PPA services. She also advises many companies on the opportunities presented by the transformation of the Australian energy system. Anita, thanks for joining us. Coca-Cola Europacific Partners and Sun Metals Corporation just told us the main drivers behind their renewables transition. In your view, what are the other issues driving market leaders to contract for renewables?
Thank you, John. I agree with everything that obviously was mentioned before from the sustainability, customer perspective, as well as communities. I think, and managing the near-term cost. I think the key thing that I would like to add potential is just the need to think about the longer-term electricity price risk in the Australian market that is facing unprecedented transformation. And I think the slide that's just popped up here is just a snapshot of the results achieved by a corporate that has entered into a financial PPA that was well structured. The period 2020 to 22 where we are right now is characterized by multi-year lows in 2020 during the COVID period when demand was very low, and now where we are sitting in an exceptionally high price environment with the war in Ukraine and gas prices. So if the typical corporate would have saved probably about 10% relative to procuring black power over this last 3-year period, and if you were to contract short-term green power, it would have cost you you would have saved 30% entering into a long-term contract. So the importance of really looking at PPAs as a long-term risk management instrument can help you weather market turbulence and also achieve competitive advantage.
Now, when it comes to renewable energy, how do approaches vary between companies of different sizes?
I think Sun Metals actually is a very good example in terms of how they've approached it as a large organization, really mixing technology types, mixing contracting models, but also the time to market. And I think large organizations has got that benefit where they could actually enter into different arrangements at different times to really diversify their risk exposure. Small organizations, unfortunately, don't have that opportunity. Seldom, I would say, smaller energy users are limited in the options that they've got. It's either retailer intermediated PPA. Sometimes it requires joining a buyers group to really get interest from the market, because a lot of retailers still looks at PPAs as a structured product. But there's definitely standardization happening in the market, and all the organizations, whether you're large or small, I think electrification is something to look at, and obviously it depends what power you use, how green it is, but behind the meter storage, generation and demand response can make contributions. And of course, energy efficiency is always front of mind, I think, for all organizations. Reduce your energy consumption requirements as much as possible in the first instance. So there's great opportunities for organizations of all sizes.
Very few people know as much as you about renewable energy. What excites you about the renewable energy contracting space, say for the next 5 to 10 years?
Clearly, the next 10 years is going to be challenging and fraught with a lot of uncertainty. But I'm excited about three key things. And that would be the willingness that I'm seeing amongst the corporate world to start tackling Scope 3 emissions that's often been deemed to be put in the too hard box. And I think Apple has set a great example globally, but even locally, Woolworths has got some serious targets for their reducing emissions in their supply chain. Secondly, is the value that financial institutions are increasingly attributing towards sustainability. And we can see the increase in sustainability-linked loans by PPA, corporates that sign PPAs, such as Woolworths, Coles, Wesfarmers, Orica, where achievement of emissions reduction goals are clearly linked to either to preferential interest rates on billions or hundreds of millions of dollars of debt, which really enables a PPA to bring additional financial value to the table. And then thirdly, I would say that finally we're starting to see state, federal, as well as transmission governments and transmission companies getting out of the starting blocks around the transmission infrastructure required to absorb more renewables into the grid. And I'm excited for by Transgrid recently announcing that they will exceed and bring forward some of the timelines that has previously been given for Energy Connect, HumeLink, and as well as the BNI West. So that I think will accelerate the transformation, and that's, I think, great news.
In the lead up to us doing this webinar, I saw a graphic that you showed me with some of the changes that are coming up, and I'd like to show that in your next answer. There are issues that people need to look out for, of course. Is there anything in this space that keeps you up at night? And I think when you look at this graphic that you've put together, that would keep me up at night. So can you tell us more about that?
Yes, as much as I said, I'm excited about the acceleration of the transformation. We talked about networks, but at the same time, the early closure of coal-fired generation must excite everybody who's actually serious about climate action and worried about climate risk. If you look at this graphic, what it actually shows is the impact of announcements of early closure of generation just in the last year. If we look at this and the extent of the shift, there's only two coal-fired generators really in the mix post-2035. But this, unfortunately, I think there's a bit of a blind spot for me, because as important as the transformation of the supply mix is, so important is the impact that this has actually got on the markets. Every single retailer probably benefits directly or indirectly from contracting through the ASX energy futures, where there's base contracts and various financial instruments that's being sold at the moment. Without access to these kind of, be it cap contracts, which gas generators are also selling, and without access to these products, retailers will have great difficulty to provide firm electricity prices, even for short-term contracts. And some of the tier one asset-heavy retailers and gentailers are making those kind of statements right now, not sure how long they'll be able to offer fixed prices for. Unfortunately, we're sitting with the renewable generation sector having to replace these coal-fired generators, and many of the operators have still got a infrastructure mindset in mind rather than thinking of the market. And I think for that can cause significant disruption. There's not sufficient focus, in my view, at the moment on dealing with the transformation of the market and the instruments required to support contracting of renewables and energy, full stop. So I think that renewable energy asset owners that seize this opportunity are likely to be richly rewarded. But at the moment, there's few of them that's actually seizing this opportunity.
Apple is a member of RE100, as you know. They've got many of their suppliers going 100% renewable, and they're helping them to achieve that. Do you have any guidance for companies who want to involve their supply chain in going renewable?
I think Apple really has got a very good playbook, which apart from setting a very ambitious targets to be carbon neutral across the supply chain by 2030, they've actually taken early action to secure commitment of over 200 suppliers, accounting for 70% of their direct manufacturing spend, to actually commit to 100% renewable energy by 2020. They then introduced an annual audit process. You've got to actually make sure that there's steady progress made by those in your supply chain to achieve it. But apart from that, they're also providing help to the suppliers to ensure that, and in the form of free e-learning and resources and live training, to ensure that they actually can be help their suppliers to achieve these goals. But Apple goes even further in terms of Scope 3 emissions, and so does some other organizations that I'll touch on soon. It's starting to look also about what about the energy use of the customer products that's being sold. And if you take the Apple example, in Europe, there's been a very concerted effort to contract for renewables to also cover the consumption by Apple products. But the PPA that they signed in Australia with the Upper Binderkind wind farm has been particularly stated as the reason why they entered into that was to really cover the consumption of customer products. But you look at landlords, and I'm thinking landlords in a very broad sense here, be it data centers or real estate investment trusts. Some of those organizations are busy taking action and saying, we will actually not only contract for our own consumption, but we will actually contract for the consumption of our customers, whether they actually are taking action themselves or not. Let's stop worrying about whether we actually are double covering the consumption from our customers. And a good example here, if you think about Microsoft who wants to be carbon negative, it actually requires these kind of actions on Scope 3 contract for your own consumption, but contract for your consumption of your customers as well. And that'll accelerate. I think actions that's also been taken in Australia that helps with supply chain is, and this is even on the customer side, if I think about Lion's action with the Pubs and Club in New South Wales, it really was led by Lion trying to make sure that its customers are also able to participate in the renewable energy transformation. So buying groups, of course, can be a very good example for Scope 3 emissions and supply chain participants to come together and collectively take action.
Well, they were great insights. Thanks, Anita. Now, we're going to come back to you to answer some of the questions that we've been getting in on Zoom. And a reminder to anyone, if they do have questions for Anita or Jackie, please do put them in the Zoom chat. We'll come back to you shortly, Anita. Thank you very much for that. That was Anita Stadler, the head of renewable energy investments at Energetics. And if, as I said, if you have any questions to ask Anita, do put them into the Zoom chat. Now, coming back in for our final discussion now is Jackie McEwen, the Program Director at Business Renewable Centre, who RE100 are partnering with on this webinar. Good to have you back, Jackie. Now, you have over 15 years experience in carbon and energy management and renewable energy procurement. So I'm keen to get your input here. We've heard a lot about PPAs from our previous guests. BRC-A has just released its State of the Corporate PPA Market Report for 2022. What does it say about what's happening in the market and how companies are approaching the challenge of going renewable with their energy use?
Thanks, Jon. So each year we survey and assess the Australian corporate PPA market in order to profile and identify emerging trends and market challenges where we can support this market. So 2022 has been a strong year for PPAs amidst extraordinary market turmoil, and it's delivered around 830 megawatts of renewable energy project offtake. So very similar to 2021. Just on the screen there, you'll see the cover of our summary report, which we've just released on our website. We'll be releasing the full report to the market in the new year. So this year was really dominated by deals by three buyer types. So we had the very large energy user, high-profile corporates. We had some buyers groups in there and service sector buyers with smaller loads. So in particular, we saw, as mentioned already, deals by Apple, Telstra, BHP, Wesfarmers, Woolworths, Westfield, and Westpac underpinning this year's contracting results. A number of councils, as I mentioned, executing large group deals. We're also seeing significant interest in group deals from the private sector. Thirdly, smaller sectors with loads such as Bupa and HSF. We've just got up there on our screen. We have actually we're just about to launch this. It is our new buyer's diagnostic tool, which will help organisations, particularly those just starting out on the process, understand what are the options for them. So it will help you to, I guess, you start out with the first step. And sorry, I'm just jumping ahead to a question here that I'm often asked around, what are the first steps? So the first step really is to understand and define your company's goals, as well as your electricity load and any potential changes in load that you might be looking at in the years ahead, which I know can be challenging. These two factors are really essential for understanding the various options that are available to you, because not all renewable energy procurement options are available to all buyers. And they depend fairly heavily on your load size and also your sustainability goals and what sort of claims you want to make about that. And as Scott mentioned before, that's incredibly important, making sure that you're able to make those claims. And so our new buyer's diagnostic tool will actually be delivered with our new website in December this year, and we'll ask you just several basic questions, and we'll recommend to you 2 to 3 procurement options based on your answers. So it then guides you towards resources where you can find out more about the options before you launch into a tender process for a PPA or other. So we're seeing, companies sort of as with as little as sort of 1 GWh per annum, right up to sort of in the hundreds of gigawatts per annum, looking at PPAs, and also just looking at more broadly renewable energy procurement as a tool for meeting their net zero goals. Jon.
Now, you're well known for tools like that are very useful for companies of all sizes, and I've certainly seen companies both large and small using those tools. So you've done some great work there. Now, your BRC-A organisation is well known for its PPA training boot camps. For people who aren't familiar with those boot camps, what do they involve, and why should people go on one?
Our boot camps are essentially corporate PPA training for those looking to contract renewable energy via PPA. So that can be either sort of the retail PPAs with electricity retailers, or also the wholesale CFD models. So they're essentially a sort of a 1.5 day to 2 day scenario-based workshop sessions around sort of 3 structured models, taking right through from that sort of those basic 3 steps I mentioned earlier, building that internal support, and moving on to that tender process and helping you with that. And they're a little bit of a unique opportunity. You can see some images there, to learn from experienced energy buyers and industry experts who've already contracted PPAs, who can share their learnings with the room. So we held our last boot camp in September this year, and it was a full house, and we are planning on holding our next one in March in 2023. It will, all going well, be also held face-to-face, as the Sydney one was, and potentially be in Melbourne. We had sectors from, retail, finance, food and beverage, government, mining, manufacturing, property, facilities management, water, infrastructure, hospitality, logistics, the list goes on. So it really is, and it's also really for both the the procurement manager side of things, and also the sustainability manager. We've had a number of CFOs come along as well. So they're really sort of, I guess, helpful topics for organisations, no matter sort of which part of the puzzle you fit into in terms of your role. So if you are interested in joining the next training session, you just need to jump on our website and you can register your interest there.
Now, we're going to be showing that web address coming up at the end of the webinar. So anyone who is interested in going to the boot camp, and I have to say, I know we're friends, but they are really useful. I've spoken at quite a few of them, and I don't think I've been to any kind of training initiative that is so well organised and where people come away with really useful information. I think it's one of the great things that BRC-A is doing. Talking of which, BRC-A has created a lot of high quality resources and tools for companies on how to meet net zero goals. What new resources are you developing to support companies that are seeking to go renewable?
Obviously, in addition to that bioagnostic tool that I just took you through on our new website, we are now developing some new, more sort of user-friendly resources of all of our key resources. So there'll be shorter fact sheet style guides and videos to really sort of improve the user experience and make it a lot more accessible. Some of our guides are very detailed and quite long, and so some of the feedback that we've had is to make those a little bit simpler, so we'll be doing that. Our new website will also feature a user dashboard that will enable you to customise your learning pathway. So that's the resources and the training, and will also provide some information on aggregation services if you're looking at group buying. And then finally, we are also looking to develop a series of completely new resources on new topics. Some of the key topics we've talked about here today, such as supply chains, and also group buying guide, where probably the first cab off the rank will be our Meeting Your Sustainability Commitments guide. So that will be released in the new year, looking at how you meet your RE100 Science-Based Targets Initiative and climate active commitments. in a sort of a short fact sheet style. We're also looking at a post-execution guide, more for sort of that wholesale PPA, and a number of other guides are in the pipeline.
Well, thanks for that, Jackie. Now I'm going to ask you and Anita to hang around so we can answer some audience questions. And this is where we are going to pass the floor over to you, our audience. Now, if you haven't put a question in yet, please feel free to do so in the chat section of the Zoom app. We've actually got one question come in, which is, do we see any tools or platforms arising that can facilitate joint PPAs? Who would like to take that one on?
Yes, I'm happy to just jump in. At the moment, we, in terms of BRC's role, it's something that we've been asked quite a lot. So on our new website, we're going to have a facility where you basically register your interest around group or aggregation procurement. We are also looking at how we might be able to facilitate particularly those early stages, which is particularly the challenging part, and getting everyone's sort of, I guess, corporate goals and timing aligned. So from our perspective, it's a bit of a watch this space. In the private sector, others might have some other answers there.
Okay, now we've got another question that's come in for a company that's never done a PPA before. What is the business case for doing a power purchase agreement? Who would like to have a go at that one?
Well, I was going to say, not being the finance guy myself, definitely get your procurement team and so forth involved in that, because basically the business case will be, if it's a direct on-site scenario, then obviously you're offsetting against your current energy contracts through retailers for that direct energy. For an off-site PPA, slightly different, but can basically have exactly the same effect. But work through your procurement teams, get your CFO or financial equivalent involved to help sort of build that business case. But there is definitely one there.
And Jackie or Anita, would you like to take that one on?
I think one needs to really look at both the financial and non-financial kind of benefits to get these business cases across the line. Talking about the uncertainty of electricity prices into the future, it definitely requires a bit of a scenario-based approach to running the financials. As I've illustrated in that slide, yes, if you look taking a longer-term perspective over multi-years, we're confident that there will be an opportunity for financial benefits, but there's no guarantee. Unfortunately, none of us has got a crystal ball, and the electricity markets are very volatile. So you need to actually look at some of the co-benefits very strongly as well, in terms of what does it mean for employees, what does it mean for customers, and what does it actually mean for the communities that you operate in, and really think about it in a much more strategic context. It's not just about the bottom line, it's about managing the risk of the transition as well, and really having that kind of instrument that help you to navigate the future. There's nobody that can guarantee that you will be in the money every year, but it's really about taking that longer term perspective and seeing it as a risk management instrument and bringing the co-benefits into the frame of the business case.
Daniel, there's a question that's come in, I think might be something you might be interested in answering. What can companies do to prepare for large electrification projects, like transitioning corporate fleets to battery electric, to ensure these can be covered by renewables? Is that one you feel comfortable answering?
Yeah, look, I think in this energy transition, I mean, we should be looking to electrify as much of the economy as we can. And I think certainly there are, for the lighter vehicles, it makes sense to electrify those. I suppose where we're operating in terms of that ultra heavy transport sector, it is notoriously difficult to abate. You can't electrify it for the reasons I talked about earlier around just the weight of the batteries negating from payload, and the fact that these vehicles are high utilization, operating 24/7. So again, for us, for that ultra heavy application, that's where I think green hydrogen can actually, and through the fuel cell electric vehicles, actually provide that key role in decarbonising that sort of that sort of 15 to 20% of the economy that can't be electrified.
Look, and I think what's interesting too with regards to electrification of everything, one of the things that I've been looking at is companies that are looking at getting what we call bi-directional electric vehicles, that you don't just use renewable energy to charge up those vehicles. The bi-directional aspect means that you can use those vehicles with the batteries that are in them, the very big batteries in them, that you can then basically use renewable energy at different times of the day, using the energy out of batteries in vehicles. And I think that's going to be a very significant thing that we're going to be seeing with corporate fleets. Another question come in, are there any financial benefits from doing a PPA? Is that something you can answer, Anita?
I think financial benefits defined in broad terms. It's for me, it includes just both bottom line benefits, savings relative to procuring electricity as business as usual, black or green, and it really depends what you're referring to here. Yes, PPAs are definitely can be much more financially beneficial than contracting green short term. If structured well, it can, in some cases, be giving you benefit relative to black power and procuring black power. But as I've mentioned before, you really need to take a longer term perspective, and it's not a guarantee. But obviously, how we structure it typically is to ensure that you manage that risk. And hopefully the design is really to ensure that you come out with a much more certain budgetary outcome, rather than to be susceptible to all this volatility that you're experiencing right at the moment, where organizations are now having over 100% increase in electricity costs. So really what PPAs are trying to do is help to manage this risk and this transition over time. And in many cases, the customers up to date that we've actually advised have made savings. But as I said, the market is very uncertain, and it cannot be the only basis.
Talking of uncertainty of electricity prices, Anita, how long are energy prices going to be bad for? Have you got any views on that?
I think if you look at the forward contract market, obviously trades out and starting to trade out into 2026. I think it remains pretty elevated. There's significant constraints in bringing on new renewables to the period to 2026, 27. We've got large generators moving out of the market in 25, talking Eraring, the largest generator in New South Wales, Yallourn in 27. There's significant price pressures likely to remain as a result of that. And until this infrastructure is rolled out, absorbing the new renewables will be challenging. And the gas prices, as we know, the Ukrainian war doesn't seem to be coming to an end very swiftly. So we expect high prices for a number of years to come still. Of course, there will be new supply coming online, and Snowy 2 hopefully from 27 onwards, and we hope to see some moderation. But as I said, delays can happen. Prices can stay higher for longer than we expect, because infrastructure projects are often prone to delays and can drag out prices even higher. So I think, unfortunately, we are in for some elevated prices for some period, and the risk in the system remains extremely high.
I want to throw this question we've just had into to Daniel and to Scott. How important has energy efficiency been when it comes to reducing your energy bills? Obviously, renewables is a key thing that we're talking about, but what have you both done when it comes to energy efficiency?
Yeah, it's a really good question, John. It's one we haven't really touched on today, but that is an area of really acute focus across the Sun Metals Zinc refinery. So, how we just fundamentally reduce that headline top line sort of energy, because it is something which we're looking at very closely, and is a very important part of the strategy going forward as we sort of forecast that future energy mix.
Scott, have you got any thoughts on that?
Sure. So, look, just to build on what Daniel's sort of talking about, energy efficiency really is the first fuel in any emissions reduction program, or at least it should be. So from our perspective, the bulk of our energy is actually used within our manufacturing operations. No huge surprise there. So we've done the fundamentals around energy audits, and we've done things like LED lighting and all that sort of stuff. So we're now very focused on how do we continue down that path from an energy efficiency perspective, and looking very closely at our process heat side of things as well, what can we do at lower temperatures, what can we do faster, overall operational efficiencies obviously have a positive impact on our energy efficiency as well. So we're quite heavily focused. We're using external people to help us in some of those instances around identifying those areas and then implementing the projects that actually come along with those.
Last two questions I'm going to throw to you, Jackie, as the head of BRC-A and our co-host of the webinar. You're getting a lot of questions from companies regarding PPAs. How are things looking right now for companies that are trying to do a PPA?
It's a really busy space. I think organisations, are in a really good position right now because there have been quite a lot of, contracts already executed and a lot of experienced people now in the market in the service provider area. We're also seeing real diversification of, the retail PPA product as well as, the wholesale deals. So it's a good time in terms of both market knowledge as well as options available. So if you are looking to do this, it's certainly you're not going to be the first cab off the rank testing it out.
And final question, what about some social license issues? Someone is asking us about that. How can a company's PPAs address those issues?
Scott was mentioning earlier, and also Anita, around the sort of the social and environmental co-benefits that corporates these days are really sort of looking to demand from retailers where possible, and also the developers who they're contracting with. So we've developed both a social licence guide and a best practice guide. We are looking to do a little bit more in this space in the near future to help both the supply and the demand sides to get a little bit closer together. But I guess it's just very important for people to understand that social licence and these co-benefits are very important to the corporates. Don't underestimate them in your tender processes.
Now, sadly, we've run out of time with today's webinar, but we're going to bring up all four people on screen again now just to thank them. On behalf of myself and Jackie, I'd like to thank you, our guests, Scott Edwards, Daniel Kim and Anita Stadler. Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And finally, on behalf of BRC-A, the Climate Group, CDP and Do Something Foundation, I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. If you do want more information on RE100, please visit our website at re100.org. If you want more information or tools or any of the reports that Jackie spoke about, go to the BRC-A website at businessrenewables.org.au. That's businessrenewables.org.au. I'm Jon Dee from RE100 and the Do Something Foundation. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.